I'm Diane Boyd. I'm the director of the Biggio Center. Welcome to Securing Breeden Grant Funding. We have a panel assembled for you. Don Mulvaney is Associate Professor in Animal Science. He's been on and currently chairs the Teaching Effectiveness Committee. Been on for about 5 years. Then we have Dr. Matthew Hope, who is Associate Professor in Music. He has secured a Breeden grant in the recent past. This is Jana Allaby of the library. She's been on the Teaching Effectiveness Committee for at least 4 years. So between the two of them, there's lots of practice looking at Breeden grant proposals. So they'll have a lot of tips for you. And then this is Dr. Lynn Mandeltork, who's a lecturer in chemistry and biochemistry. She's also secured Breeden grants in the very near past. So we'll start by hearing a little bit from our seasoned TEC members about what they're looking for in a proposal. And then we'll hear a little bit about how people who have been awarded the grants have translated them in their teaching. And then we will always be open for your questions. We're pretty flexible here. And then we'll have time for brainstorming for you all.
Well, I'll start in because I know our time is limited, and I suspect that others will see the recording and then benefit from the conversations that we have. And I thought I might take a moment and just sort of reflect or sort of capture this process as a committee. So the Teaching Effectiveness Committee has a formal charge to carry out this kind of function of promoting excellence in teaching and learning on the campus. And so we're about a 17-person committee, and virtually every college has a representative on that committee. And then we've got some folks like Diane that are ex officio, year in, year out, they're on there. So, but they all serve in a evaluation process. And one of the first things that we do, obviously, is get the proposals. And they'll be kind of processed and sorted, and then I'll take a look, or I'll make a process where we evaluate for conflicts of interest. All right, so that's one thing. I'm not going to assign your proposals to someone that is from your same neck of the woods, so to speak, or that might be something we could look at more closely, but I don't think it's been a problem, at least under my watch, of conflicts a significant way. So, so we try to make sure that we have a valid, legitimate evaluation process. Every proposal, my goal is to have a primary reviewer, a secondary reviewer, and then a tertiary reviewer whenever possible. Many times we have really 4 reviewers that have looked at your proposal. The primary reviewer has sort of the tag on the shoulder to, when we get together for a face-to-face session, they'll give some comments. They'll be your spokesperson, so to speak, for that proposal. So they've really examined it more carefully or sufficiently that they can share with everyone. Everyone has an opportunity to read, and most of the time they do read every proposal and have some impression. They may or may not have scored all of them, all right? So just because of the, if you get 40 proposals in, to have everybody do all 40 is kind of a burdensome task. But that might be something we'd look at too in terms of, but I think we've had a balanced approach in that regard. That's the process. We will get together on a day where we can all gather, and we will vet all the comments, the scores. We'll put them on a big board. We'll sort of triage through, and those scores do have important impact in making the decision. So we get to a point where we think we're going to fund. These are the must funds. These the high scores, and until we run out of money. And if we've got some just phenomenal proposals in the past, we have went to the provost's office and said, hey, we need some more money. Could we actually go beyond what we've been sort of promised? And so that has happened, but it's not something that we can guarantee. So any questions on the process? Kind of gives you an idea of how we do it. Try to run it. I've served on a number of national panels, and So it's not unlike that process as well. Now, in terms of proposals, we had the rubric up there. Yes? Oh, okay. So we had the rubric up here. You probably can't read it from maybe necessarily where you're sitting, but the evaluators will be recording scores, and they'll make comments and have sidebar comments on this. And so then those are tallied up to get a composite score, and that's the threshold. And then we begin to discuss. There'll be a lot of them that are very similar scores, and they're sort of discussing the strengths and sort of weaknesses, and if there are any on certain proposals. And so, like I said, that's how we will decide. So if you look at all these components, every one of them is important, and so you don't want to take any of them for granted. Probably the meats and potatoes, of course, is number 4, and that's really what you have said you're going to do, and we're looking for, I think, Gina, we can maybe, I don't want to tap into your comments, but we want a sound proposal, a good idea. And let me back up a step because this may not be totally clear, but there are 2 categories, and we don't sort of earmark a certain amount of funds for travel funds. This would be for you to attend a conference where you're going to advance yourself professionally, but bring back that experience and that knowledge that it impacts other faculty, impacts this culture on campus in some way, some other faculty, your students, and so forth. So characterizing and describing how that impact's going to happen is really a big piece. The other category is what traditionally we would say is a scholarly kind of project, and that you're asking a question and you're exploring with some methodology. You're creating maybe some information or data that then could give you greater abilities, increased effectiveness in your teaching activities and so forth, and also impact the campus culture and teaching effectiveness. So I can talk a little bit more about some specific things. I think well-written is the goal. Those that are not as well-written, or it's not clear, or a little fuzzy, they will not get the maximum points. Or what I might call smoking mirrors effect. If it looks like you're just kind of wanting to get some money, but you really don't, we're not clear how you're going to actually benefit from this or how we'll benefit, that will not score as highly probably as well. So it's just an example. Anyway, I can come up with some more thoughts if you have some specific questions. And I'm going to turn it to Gina because she's got some ideas too.
Yeah, I guess I think about it in terms of like rhetorical analysis, because I also have an English background. And so what's important, I think, is to think about who's going to be reading your proposal. And as Don mentioned, we have people from all different disciplines, and so they're not going to necessarily be from your discipline. And so there are things where the proposals that I've seen where it seems like it's targeted to people in your discipline, like they'll understand all of these given things, are harder, I think, for us to read in terms of giving them all the points that we think that they're due, right? So anything that you can do to make this easier on the reader is really helpful. So clarity, I know that especially in the South, sometimes we like to sort of dance around the point. But if you can be direct about what you're hoping to get from it, what's going to happen with this information or this conference that you're going to or this project that you're doing, what do you hope to get, how are you going to evaluate that, how are you going to share that, in as detailed and specific a manner as you can give is really what sort of sets some of the winning proposals apart, I think. I think, too, there's an aspect of uniqueness or novelty to the proposals. And like I said, so it's difficult if you're in one discipline that hasn't traditionally taught in a certain way, like maybe active learning, and that's what you want to put in a proposal for, then somebody else might be reading your proposal who has been familiar with active learning for a couple of decades, right? So for them, they're not going to see that as being quite as unique. So you have to make the point of this is not standard in our profession or how we teach in this discipline, and that's what makes it different, and that's what makes it unique. So I think those are things that kind of help set you apart.
Could you quickly just say what is not funded by these proposals? Because sometimes we get proposals that are sort of in the wrong wheelhouse.
Like graduate student hours?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you say more about that?
Well, I mean, if it doesn't fall into the sort of the mission purpose of the Breeden grant and what this, so read that very carefully. And if it falls outside of that, then it'll probably get triaged very quickly. So just make sure you adhere to those requirements and expectations.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but I think, you can apply to get equipment or travel somewhere, but you can't sort of apply to say, well, I want to fund my grad student for a semester.
Right.
To do the data analysis or whatever. Is that right? Okay.
There have been some cases where some student labor and things have been included, so that's not totally out of the question.
But there was clear delineation of the learning impact for those students.
Exactly.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we were talking about students. I do a lot with undergrads. Most of my stuff, even though I'm also involved, circuit is very much focused in graduate ed, and I'm the only ones in undergrad, and in special education. And so for me, with undergraduate students, I'm trying to get them more involved in research. And so it might be that I might request, or that's, I guess, a question. I noticed in reading it that undergraduate hours could be considered, not for graduate fellowship, but actually the work that they're putting in and the time that they're putting in, those types of things. And so that's why I'm asking, because it's not a typical what you would see. You usually see graduates working on that, but I don't have any graduate students. So I have a lot of undergrads working in research. So that was kind of, I guess, a question that I don't know whether that's okay to apply for undergrads in that manner, or
Well,
with.
I mean, I wouldn't want I guess the committee, speaking for the committee, that they would want a proposal from an undergraduate, but it has to be from the faculty member,
Right.
so.
Okay. But if it was an undergraduate project that they were working on in a creative way, that would be, obviously.
I think the assumption there is that the process of working with you, it has a learning impact
It
to
does.
the undergraduate student and also for you, so I think it would be.
And that's what I was asking, because what I'm trying to do is also have undergraduates more involved with research activities on campus, because that's part of the Auburn initiative, is to try to do that. And since I've been here, I've tried to just find creative ways to do that. So it would definitely impact them at research and then presenting at conferences and things as well. So you could see a true learning outcome for them in a product, so to speak. So I just wanted to ask about that, I guess.
I would I'm sorry.
I think what would be helpful about a proposal like that is if you do have sort of a very specific outcome in mind. So these students are going to work on this project. These are the tasks that they're going to do, which are going to connect to this specific learning outcome.
Okay.
And then I'll be able to demonstrate it through this, right? So sort of following that whole arc is definitely something that would help boost that up and make it as clear as possible, right?
And so the scholarly perspective too would be that you're learning something about a pedagogical process of student development, student learning, that you can assess and measure and then ultimately share that through some means with others in a literature form or something. So then it would be really good. You had some students involved in your
I
project.
did. So I can comment on that in two ways. The first is that part of the rubric actually says something about scale of impact, or so you would want to emphasize, somewhere in the narrative there. So I guess in your writing,
Number of students and courses involved.
there you go.
Number of students.
So you'd want to say how this student's project is going to affect other students or something of that nature. And the funding that I received was to fund undergraduates as learning assistants. So they're circulating the classroom in an active learning environment. And so they're actually walking around, they're getting paid for their time there, and to help people understand and explain things to them, or ask the student to explain something to the learning assistant. And so they're being compensated for their time in the classroom. And outside, they have a few.
But there was also some training and development of
There's
those
training,
students
yes.
and.
But so the money is to fund them to have a direct impact on the students in the large classroom.
And an assessment of corresponding assessments of how, that whole process, so.
Oh, sure, it's not a
Okay.
standalone,
Yeah.
you don't just pay them and see
Right.
you later.
Right.
Just want to go in and all that.
That's a good question, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry to interrupt. I just thought since that was,
It's great.
thank you.
I've got about 2 more minutes or so.
So if you have, go ahead.
Can grad students also apply for this? Or is it more like faculty?
It would have to have the faculty as an investigator on it. And we get into some gray areas on these faculty.
Right, but if you work with your advisor or brought an idea to him or her, your name, that's something for you.
Yeah,
I told you this in PFF, I was a co-PI on a Breeden grant when I was a graduate student.
Okay.
yeah.
It didn't make it not happen.
Right.
I have a question. Can you speak to the eligibility of previous Breeden grant awarded?
Question.
Wow, that is a good one. I don't know that we have any rules that you can't come right back and try another.
I just see on the rubric that
Oh, yeah.
people.
We do try to lean towards, so newer faculty or faculty who are just starting out. So we do have you get a couple extra points if you haven't applied before, or if you're untenured and on the tenure track. But Don and I were just talking about this a few minutes ago, and I don't think that has really limited any of the other proposals from people who have received it before or who are tenured, especially if it's a strong proposal for something innovative or something that looks like it's going to have a pretty significant impact.
Might lose a point on that box that gets checked, but the
Just
goal
have
would
to
be
pick it up
elsewhere, yeah, so, yeah.
Can two faculty submit, or is one primary, the other is the co?
Might be good just to convey that there's a collaboration that's going on that. I think it could, we may have actually had that last year.
We did.
I can't remember the outcome though.
I do.
Oh.
One of them specifically was a co-travel grant. So as you'll see, travel grants can be awarded up to $2,000 and instructional grants are $4,000. So this team of people wanted to go to a conference together in the spirit of course redesign. So they both applied for $4,000. But last year we had many applications last year, so we were only able to fund 41% of the proposals, and that was one that we could not fund. So, but it's not unheard of. We didn't throw it out because it was 2 people.
And some of those points that were lost, I think, were also because of a lack of what exactly is going to happen from this.
Right, when they got back, it was unclear. So
So if those points had been sort of made up or had captured, then that wouldn't have happened now.
capture the points, like capture the flag.
I'm sorry, I have another question. Along the lines of, I guess, 2 people, if you had an event that was going to be part of a bigger event, for example, I read that consulting and traveling expenses to recognize experts, we're getting ready in College of Ed to do an event on disability awareness. And I have an international speaker that could not only enhance our college, but could be a university speaking event. I don't know whether this would be something that I could write for that person for a different event that I'm involved with. Does that make sense? So it's not necessarily, they could speak in my class, absolutely, and he's already agreed to do that. But also at this larger college event, so you actually, I guess, get a bigger praying for your back, for that person to come here. I don't know how that's looked on, to be honest. I know we need to do creative things in the classroom first, obviously, but I didn't know whether that would be worth writing or not. So, I guess that was another question.
I think you could package that in a way that, because it's going to impact the community and culture. So you could sort of convey how that will happen, justify it, I could see.
It's a possibility.
Yeah, and I could see, I mean, if you are talking about having this person coming in, so on one hand, like you showed, you have some support from the college, right? So some of it's going to be funded that way, and you're asking for another piece to help fund this thing. And then, if in your proposal, if you were to say, you know, they're going to do like these 3 things, right? So they're going to go to this class and talk to these students about these things, and then they're going to give sort of a lecture, so that way we can sort of broaden that impact from having that speaker. I think that would be a pretty strong proposal, especially if you can find some ways to, again, sort of assess how you know that that's successful.
I hate to go.
He's going to teach a class, I suppose.
Yeah, the priority, right? Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe we could hear a little bit from Matthew about.
Sure. I wrote a successful travel grant, which is the $2,000 amount, and my department might be like other departments in the school. The money designated for professors is primarily designated for research money. So if you're presenting at a conference, that'll get approved, but my chair would not approve me attending a workshop to expand myself as a teacher. So that's what I used the money for. There was a training program that really interested me. I'm a professor in the music department. I teach applied voice, and there's an institution called the National Center for Voice and Speech in Salt Lake City, which was a 3-week training program that applied it taught me how to use technology to enhance my teaching. So what they trained me on is a lot of the same equipment that physicists, acoustic technicians, speech language pathologists use, and how to bring that into the applied voice studio. And that's a really new thing because this marriage of voice pedagogy and science has only happened in the past couple of decades. So the proposal I wrote was to get trained on this equipment, bring it back to my students, and then it also brought something new to our department because it's kind of complex to use, and you need some training on it. So other faculty members, if they're interested, now know that I have this training, and that can benefit other studios. It benefits the choirs. Another cool thing, even though it was a teaching grant, it really impacted my research opportunities because it gave the music department a dialogue with COSAM and with the speech language pathology department, and some cool research opportunities have emerged from that because I now have the training to speak the language along with them.
That's like geometric impact.
Yeah.
Right? That's nice.
So yeah, it was terrific. It didn't cover all my expenses. 3 weeks but it made it possible. I used some of my own funding to go, but it would have been impossible for me to attend this really meaningful program without the $2,000 Breeden grant.
So there's a lot of clues in what Matthew just said about how to think about your impact. So, and one of the things that happens at Auburn and other places is that we are a little siloed off in our departments, and so if you can talk about your intentional plans for, you know, I now have the language to talk to colleagues in COSAM about XYZ, or I now have the language to talk with colleagues in the College of Liberal Arts about disability studies, that would probably go a long way with the committee, I would think.
It added some energy to my voice studio too, because I just have a bigger bag of tricks now. They're not tricks; they're scientifically proven. But you know, it gave me more angles to approach my teaching. So, and some of the equipment I don't necessarily have in my studio, but I'm like with my student, hey, let's go over to the speech language clinic today and let's measure this. So, I think that's been a little more exciting because I have new techniques and new angles with my teaching that I didn't have 2 years ago.
And I think that's definitely what we like to see on the reading the proposal side, is that you've been really thoughtful about, you know, it's not just, oh, this thing sounded cool, let me go do it, but it's, I want to go to this thing for this purpose, and then these are the ways I think I'm going to be able to use it when I come back, or these are the people that I hope to approach in terms of sharing what I've learned. So I think that's always really helpful too, just that sort of intentionality and seeing that in your proposal.
Something we have in common, because I think maybe that's something that helped us get funded with our project, is talking about having this type of thing in common with the physics department. So the broader impact and opening conversations between people always seems to be something people like. I gave the 1 or 2 sentence introduction. So using undergraduates as assistants in the classroom, not just to carry papers, which they don't do, but to actually walk around and be like little instructors. So trying to multiply the presence of me in a classroom of 270 it was really the goal. If you want to do active learning in a large class, it's not easy. A lot of us know that. And that's a serious turnoff for a lot of people trying to do new things in the classroom. You've got 270 in a lecture hall. But if you can somehow clone yourself and have a feedback source for small groups of students within the 270, then you can actually get some active things done. So that's what the money was for, is to make little, they're not clones of me, they all have their wonderful personalities and abilities. But in training them and this whole process of assessment, which Dawn alluded to, being all part of the plan. Yeah. But I can also give some advice, which was not requested, which is to use the rubric. I believe the rubric's available. Yeah. So use the rubric when you're actually going to start writing. Do you have clear aims? What is the outcome you expect? What are the major impacts? What are the smaller impacts? What are potential, even unexpected things that could happen? So actually using the rubric for an outline is a really good place to start. Then you know that you address all their concerns and you're going to maximize the points.
It also makes it easier for us to read and score.
Yes.
Do that. So remember, be kind to the readers.
Yes. That's what I tell my students. Know your audience. Know your audience.
And if I'm remembering correctly, one of the things that I think was really helpful about the proposal that you had turned in was not only like, okay, so we're going to get some students, we're going to train them, they're going to do this in the classroom, but here's how we're going to identify them. Here's our plan for how we're going to train them and get them in the classroom, how we're going to use them in the classroom. So it's, again, that level of detail and specificity.
I think I received some feedback that pictures were helpful. So what does it look like for your project to be in place? So I had a graph saying this is what it might look like before, this is what it might look like after. Giving someone an opportunity to visualize what's actually the thing you're proposing. It shouldn't, in my opinion, this is my opinion, I don't think it should be all words. It shouldn't just be a bunch of words. There should be more there for someone to latch onto and to remember.
I think talking in some ways generally in addition to specifically, and what I mean by that is if I start using words like I want better training on the electric autograph, or I want to understand the interaction of the first and second formants, and it will really help me with teaching the male passaggio. That's true, that it will help me teach the male passaggio, but they will have no idea what I'm talking about with the vocab unless they're in my field. So I think being specific, being general is a real art.
Yeah, it is actually, right.
Could you use footnotes for like, I want to use it for this, and the meaning is like, this is how it is.
I think I've seen some that are like that.
You don't have a lot of space.
Yeah, I was actually, my question was, is it better to like, if you're using a term, a professional term, is it better to somehow talk about it in the body of your proposal, or just mention it in the footnote? Is that?
I think it would depend on how specific the term is. Like, is there a way for you to describe what you're trying to do without having to define that term for a non-professional?
Okay.
Can you do it between commas? If it can be a phrase, if the definition can be a phrase that's like brief, I think I would include it in the body.
Okay.
But certainly, you are all experts in your fields, and the problem with experts is that our definitions become longer and longer and longer. So if there's a way you can dial it back. So now we've had a little bit of question and answer, and we're moving into the brainstorming portion of the program. If you would, for about 2 or 3 minutes, if you have a piece of paper and like to write, just jot down some ideas about potential Breeden grant proposals you might like to explore. And may I encourage you not to be, don't be harnessed by what could be possible. Think about the big, crazy, blue sky is the limit possibilities, right? So just think of a few different examples of ways that in your teaching, what are you doing in your teaching now, or what do you want to learn about your teaching now, that you might be able to write a proposal regarding. Usually when I say blue sky, it totally shuts everyone down. So I'm sorry to have done that, but in that set of fuzzy description.
Don't limit yourself.
Yeah, don't limit yourself. Just think for a minute about your teaching and what you want
So it should be
to happen.
teaching related or it can be research related as well. So,
I think start with your dreams and then we can see if we can't retrofit them. Okay? Yeah, thank you. So let's take 2 or 3 minutes to do that. Do you guys need some paper? So we have colleagues from across the university, and it's not quite active learning, but I would love it if you would pair up with someone who isn't quite next to you and share your ideas with each other. So it might require that you stand up and move, but we have lots of chairs that are free, so take about 10 minutes to chat with your new collaborator across the table. I heard some groups come up with their interesting advice and tips, but also some interesting ideas for proposals. So if you have either one of those things you'd like to share, tips or proposals, I want to distill them a little bit, and then we'll have time for feedback, right, on those ideas. So one tip that Tanya, right, came up with is the first thing she did was consult the strategic plan when she started building out her Breeden grant proposal. Nobody loves a strategic plan like Auburn loves a strategic plan. So if you can tie what you're working on to the strategic plan, you have a leg up. Any other tips? Tips? Yes, Leanne.
I thought Matt had a really good one that I had not thought of at all, and that's to actually talk to somebody in your department that has gotten a Breeden grant and just kind of brainstorm that with them. I mean, I think I look for all the other things, that I don't look for the simple things.
Yes.
And so maybe talk with someone to see how they approached it, or what their thoughts were, whether they share some ideas, or those types of things.
And there's a resource on the Breeden grant website. It says 2014 proposals, but last year we changed the funding cycle, so it's actually abstracts from successful proposals from 2 years ago. And if you go to the Biggio Center and scroll down, this is what the top looks like, right? Biggio Center. And if you scroll down to here, then you can see all of the previous grant award winners and their departments, which can be helpful, right?
Absolutely.
So.
these are the statements.
I think for the travel grants especially, would you mind just scrolling back there? So my travel grant was, what I used the money for was to attend the National Center for Voice and Speech, but a really bad title would be attending the National Center for Voice and Speech. You know, you want it to be about, your title should read like you're going to an academic conference and this is your abstract title and this is my project. You know, there's an art to that, capturing the whole nature of the project in, 10 words. But you look at these are all really good titles, for the most part.
See, there's an example of what you were just talking about. But for instance,
But see,
like,
that one's excellent. The use of multimedia teaching strategies to support United 21 students' teaching effectiveness. That sums it all up.
right. Thank you. Any other tips? This one is life in balance. This is nice.
See, now this project was funded anyway, but city scenarios doesn't tell me very much.
Yes.
So obviously the project was good, otherwise it would have gotten funded, but if you can capture your project in a title.
Because Because really what it is, if you read the abstract, is it's interdisciplinary, right? History and urban design. Water systems, food networks, wow. Oh, gosh, if I could redesign our interaction today, I might give you this and say, come up with a good title for it. Because there's lots of things to do there. Any other tips from your groups, and then we can move on to ideas? Okay, so, no tips? Okay. Okay.
Thinking about our conversation as a tip, think about multiple perspectives that may arise. So if you have something that you think you're doing for students, think about not only impact on students but also impact on faculty. If you're targeting a particular group of students, then think of what are the other students who would be interacting with those targeted students, what would be the impact on them. So that's the multiple perspectives.
And also, if I can build on that, kind of the once removed factor, right? So when you just said the impact on the students you teach, but also their impact on other students, yeah, that's great. Thank you. So, ideas. I know it can be tricky to share ideas in a competitive marketplace, but I'll invite you to, if you have an idea that you just can't keep in, to share it.
I can be brave,
Okay.
because Lynn and Jana basically wrote my proposal for me.
Nice work.
So thank you. So the topic is international student integration into mainstream Auburn classes, as we have more international undergraduates coming into Auburn. And so that's a general idea. So the general problem I'm trying to solve is an integration problem, how to integrate. And so a couple of things that, Lynn mentioned that you could have students make peer videos, so videos for each other about a particular topic, where they would be able to have a script, because if English isn't their strong suit, which is the case of some of these new international undergrads, they could actually write out what they want to say. So then they could practice speaking English in the domain. We're talking about teaching chemistry, so they could then present a chapter or a lesson about that chapter for their peers, which they write out that way. So that could be really neat. And then the other aspect which Jana helped with is thinking about not only how creating tools for these international students, but then also thinking about tools for the rest of the Auburn student population, how they could work with these international students in group settings or activity settings.
And since he said that, I could add that President's Life is also interested in international students and all these things, so there's an integration aspect.
Will they give a match to my written grant? Maybe.
Maybe.
It's always good.
Is it too much, Raj, to also take those videos that are created and hand them to domestic students and say, now you create the subtitles? Like you listen to this to try to attune your ear to a different dialect and write the subtitles for the video. Is that too much? Or is that?
No, I don't. I mean, that could work.
Do you think there's some value? I guess that's the larger question. I guess I have an assumption that there's value to helping people who don't normally hear other dialects listen to the dialects.
Wondering how best to accomplish that.
Yeah.
But there's something there, yeah. So that's it's a kernel of an idea there. I figure out how to flesh that out.
You're right, have the domestic students do something with the videos too, aside from using them as learning artifacts. You see what I mean?
Sure.
But I mean, if they were going to make the transcript for it, then wouldn't that also sort of help to reinforce the learning that they're doing of that subject from the other person? Or to check and see if they've understood correctly? Could be another.
Well, I think if you do it, you could almost do it like when you're doing, sorry, disability oriented, so I'm thinking hearing impairment. Automatically throws up the thing maybe with deafness and hard hearing. If you have a student that's looking at that transcript, then you can actually talk to the student to make sure the transcript's appropriate. So that student could actually look at it and say, yes, that's what I meant, or no, that's not what I meant, because the language may be so different, or the interpretation's different. So that way those two students can actually talk about that as well. I don't know.
Right, so then, but then in class, when these students are in class, then you need opportunities for further interaction.
Exactly.
So in something like an easel classroom, we're talking about sort of social engineering the groups a little bit. So you really had, maybe 2 internationals and 4 domestics at a table of 6. And then they could, support each other's learning. And then writing on the board, all of those kind of activities could be part of the group activity. Maybe the initial interaction is through this video exchange.
It's cool idea. Good idea.
Any other ideas that you want to share before we finish up with final questions?
Well, one of my friends told me that whatever you think that is not important, if you choose wise words, you can make it appear something appropriate. So I think appropriate words can be powerful, probably in your statement. Like, I'm a newbie, so I don't know actually about these things. I'm just a grad student. But I think like choosing the words is very, very important in like conducting your purpose. So that's all I have.
I was thinking about the spectrometer.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I just want to talk about that. So because
Well-
there's kind of a model there, right? The idea that you have a research question, but then if you could figure out a way to either create a lab session or a series of lessons where students would be engaging in the research.
So do you want me to explain?
Sure, if you want to, I mean, he has a particular invention in mind that could really help the city of Auburn.
I bet someone has thought about it before. Like, you know that like different spectrometers are used for different materials. So if we come up with a fully automated recycler, you can just give a trash bag to it, it will rip it off. And if you just spread all of the trash, like you can put different spectroscopies on this thing, and you say, okay, at that spot I see an organic material, so I will take it out. At that spot I see an aluminum can, so I will take the aluminum can out. So you can use this fully automated recycler to take different things apart. That way you don't need to like tell people, okay, put your cans over here, put your plastic over here, put your this over there, because they won't do it. Anything that takes a little bit of energy, they will not do it. So I was thinking about like something like this, and we thought about like making this a teaching thing, like how can you teach this thing, and we thought like if it's a project, then you can give this as a project to your students, like what can be used for this material. Go and search, like what kind of spectrometers can be used for plastic, what can be used for aluminum, what can be, and then maybe apply for some grant for making a little bit of those things to see if it actually works or not. So that's how we developed our idea to apply for a grant with your help.
So, what's compelling about this idea and several of your ideas is that when we're teaching, we try to think about how to break down what we're teaching in steps or scaffold it so students can get it. And I think sometimes we also do that with grants, right? Except sometimes I think we look at how much the grant will fund and then we think, what can I ask for that will be $4,000? Rather than thinking about technically what you're doing is scaffolding the grant, right? So I could do this small part of the idea with this grant, and then I'll apply for another grant and get the next small part to keep building, so.
There's a section of the proposal too that talks about budget. So if there's a huge mismatch, like suppose I wanted to do something that costs $6,000, but I only had a $2,000 travel grant, say where the other money's gonna come from. I think that's a good idea. So like, well, I don't understand it costs this much, but the grant's only for $2,000. So if you get a matching from your department or from private funding or a sub, like your professional organization, you're writing a grant with them too. I think that would be a positive.
Yes, well, it indicates your ability to hustle,
Yeah.
right? So that, for grant money, sorry to alarm you. So as we move into the last section of our time together, I wanted to make sure we had a moment to revisit any questions or for you to get specific feedback. Yes?
If I'm applying for something, is it troublesome if I'm applying for the same subject, for the same subjects, I apply for a grant for the same subject from another, like institution for another grant? Is it okay if I have already a grant, but for that certain subject, but I'm applying for more money for this, for Breeden program? Is it okay?
I mean, I think that's standard practice.
Yeah.
It's-
Okay.
It's not like when you're sending in a manuscript and you can only
Okay.
send it to one place at a time.
Okay.
Does anyone want to say
Yeah,
to
but you
that?
have to, like, the money that you're applying for here, you have to specify, like, how is that different than what this money's already covering, right?
Right.
So you can't get money for the same thing twice.
From two different places, right?
Okay.
But you could, I guess I misunderstood then, because you could do part of the money from one place and specify what it's for.
And this one for another part?
Right.
So
Okay.
with us, we have a national council grant, I'm also going for this disability initiative. So maybe that money from the national council could do something with this scholarship, or moving that scholar. And I could put that in here, but then I could also tell you why I'm applying for this, for the other part of that
Right.
project.
Yeah, so it's like you need $10,000, right? And so
This is
8,000 is coming
this
from
what I
here,
have. Okay.
and this is what I have left, yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, but it can't be like,
It's all about.
like, I only need, $1,000, but I got $1,000 here and I'm gonna get $1,000 here, right?
Right. Well, that makes me think of that story in the news about the bogus HIV researcher who had swindled millions of dollars from the government using grants, like writing grants to fund research that didn't actually happen, yeah.
Don't do
You
that.
can't.
Yeah, don't do that. That's what I'm suggesting.
Buy a car.
So any other questions or?
$500.
Right.
It's just not worth it.
Do you guys have any final comments?
Good luck.
Yeah.
Well, I think the Biggio Center could help them with the Biggio video.
It's big.
Big.
It's big.
You're
Pronunciation
both all over
guy,
it.
yes.
It's big. When I was applying, I think actually Raj helped me write my successful proposal a couple years ago. Did I send you a draft or something for feedback? I think that was an option back then, so it still exists.
And just because like it goes up to $4,000 doesn't mean you have to ask for $4,000. So if you need $500, ask for $500.
Yes.
Oh, your birthday would be great.
Any other final thoughts or questions? Yes.
If you can't put your goals into, if you can't put your goals into 1 or 2 sentences each, and give me 1 sentence about the first goal, 1 sentence about the second goal, and 1 sentence about the third, then maybe they're not fully informed.
So you're suggesting a backwards course design approach to your I get it. So come up with your goals first, right? Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. If we can give, let's thank our families. Do you think